Warning, if you're emotional about anything I say or do, there will be no fucks given.
Now, I'm not even gonna lie to you, but since y'all already know who your boy is, I don't need to explain myself. But anyways, we got another versus battle between Ulquiorra, aka the representation of nihilism, aka known as the demon of despair, versus Zenon, the best Dark Triad member, aka Beelzebub's skeletal vessel. Now, before we get to the scalings of Ulquiorra, make sure y'all niggas like, comment, and subscribe, because 2K is literally on the way. But anyways, AP. So Senji technically stated that Ichiko's spiritual presence could be echoed across the whole world. And technically, Sğ쏘ʀᴇ mirrors Earth, which is technically a planet. So if he's able to affect a planet with just his spiritual presence, he should be easily country level plus. And remember, this nigga is straight up in base, my nigga. And Ichigo got way stronger since then, but since I can't quantify that shit, I'm not gonna use that for his scaling. But during his first encounter with Grimmjow in base, Ichigo like hits him, but it gets casually blocked with no damage. Then he gets literally pushed back. And while that shit happens, Grimmjow states that he doesn't even feel like killing him at all, which would mean he's heavily suppressed and just fucking with this nigga like a lion with its prey. So Grimmjow tells Ichigo to go into his Bankai, then proceeds to beat the everlasting fuck out of this nigga Ichigo. And remember this shit, Grimmjow is still holding
while whooping
back
this nigga's ass.
And the crazy thing about this shit is that Bankai is literally a 10 times multiplier, and Grimmjow is just mercifully beating this nigga's ass. So Ichigo gets tired of that shit and uses a malicious Getsuga Tensha head on, and Grimmjow literally tanks that shit. And this nigga Ichigo still wants smoke. Like the goddamn audacity of this nigga. But we still can't even scale Grimmjow yet because he still hasn't shown his full power. But on the second fight though, shit. So after a whole month, they have finally met. So Ichigo goes into his Bankai, right? And guess what? Bro doesn't give the slightest fuck. But this is where it gets interesting. So Ichigo whips out the Hollow Mask, right? And it got this nigga shook. So Ichigo literally begins to destroy Grimmjow, right? But you also have to pay attention that Grimmjow only has one fucking arm, which means this nigga is literally nerfed. And after Grimmjow starts to get overwhelmed, he starts to get more serious and actually starts to match on power with Visor Mask Ichigo. And for the people that thinks that Grimmjow is not relative to Ichigo with the Visor Mask and power, that is completely fucking delirious. Like, Ichigo's trying to kill this nigga because he literally has a fucking time limit, which means he's trying to go all out and kill this nigga as soon as possible. And Grimmjow is literally keeping up with him in strength. So he would technically scale 100 times stronger than base Ichigo, which means you can scale Grimmjow to like continental to multi-continental, since he's technically like 5 times of that when meets the criteria. And remember, this is Grimmjow in base. But before their round 3, guess who finally shows up? Yes, fucking Ulquiorra. Finally! And bro, this nigga Ichigo did not waste any fucking time. This nigga went straight to Bankai with the Visor Hollow Mask on, which means yes, this is 100 times multiplier. Remember this shit. No, I'm not even gonna lie, it did look like Ichigo was putting in that work. But there's one thing you should always remember during your experiences and shit. Always pay attention to detail, because Ichigo with the 100 times multiplier didn't do no sorts of damage to this nigga Ulquiorra. All it did was damage his clothing, and which means he casually scales above Grimmjow, which would make him casually multi-continental. And on Ichigo versus Grimmjow's third fight, this nigga Ichigo was actually able to fight Grimmjow in Bankai without using the Hollow Mask, which means he had to be 10 times stronger than previously. And as soon as Ichigo went into his Hollow Mask, Grimmjow wasn't having none of that shit, so he straight up goes into his resurrection form and literally starts beating the living shit out of Visor Mask Ichigo. And a resurrection is technically like a 10 times multiplier, but you know Ichigo already got some fucking amps and shit, and you know he wins. So anyways, on to the good shit. But this time, play the soundtrack. So Ichigo pulls up to this nigga's place, right? And they get to fighting. And Ichigo's literally showing that he's literally relative to this nigga while in Bankai. And Ichigo starts dodging this nigga's attacks. And he catches this nigga's hand, right? And cuts this nigga. And which would mean is that he's actually relative to him. So Ichigo finally activates the Hollow Mask and actually overpowers the fuck out of Ulquiorra. And straight up takes a full-on blast from this nigga. And we all know that this nigga Ulquiorra was literally like, fuck this, and flies away so he can go into his second release. Now I'm not even gonna lie, but this nigga is clean, and he's 10 times stronger than base, so he literally blitzes Visor Mask Ichigo, then flicks this nigga to a wall with his fucking wing. And if you think that shit is just bad, bro, this nigga was already destroying Ichigo in his first release, but for some fucking reason this nigga straight up goes into his second release just to make this nigga truly feel despair, then proceeds to perception Bleach Ichigo, like just casually. And you have to remember that it's another 10 times multiplier. So Ichigo gets right back into the Hollow Mask, but this nigga Ulquiorra still proceeds to whoop his ass. Like that shit didn't even change nothing. And what really makes this scaling confusing as shit is because Ulquiorra in his first release was completely destroying Hollow Mask Ichigo. Like you couldn't even scale them niggas to each other. The gap was just fucking wide. Like it could be Ichigo getting, you know, his Zenkais and shit, which would make the most sense, but still, like, damn. So Ichigo finally goes into his hollow form and proceeds to destroy Ulquiorra. This shit was literally a complete stump, but in the Hellverse movie, it was actually a whole lot closer. And it was technically like verbatim stated that Kubo preferred that to be the actual fight between Ichigo and Ulquiorra, in which you could call that fight canon. And Ichigo was doing some multi-planetary feats while in the Hellverse. And the fact that Ulquiorra was able to at least survive a little bit against that version of Ichigo, which means he would have to be planetary. And even with the multipliers, like if you put 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times multi-continental, and you would get planet level speed. Now let's say I lowballed Ichigo, right? Like him versus Byakuya, right? Let's say he was only massively hypersonic plus, which is technically like the speed of lightning. Now the speed of lightning and the speed of light is only a 3 times difference, and Ulquiorra is tens of thousands of times stronger than that version of Ichigo. Like he would totally range around 14,000 to 20,000 times the speed of light, and which is massively faster than light plus. So for the conclusion of his stats, Ulquiorra, AP multi-continental to moon to planet, speed, FTL to massively faster than light to massively faster than light plus. Now for Zenon. Now didn't I tell y'all this nigga was gonna be the best? Like come on man, it's always the quiet ones to be the most interesting. Like a young nigga can't miss. Now for AP. So if Patry did a country level attack, right, and Zegred fucking negs a completely stronger version of Patry because he becomes a full elf and shit, Zegred should be scaled to country level plus. And if Zenon should scale somewhere around Zegred or even higher, then Zenon in base would scale to country level plus. And the crazy thing about this shit, I didn't even get to the multipliers yet. Like just 1% is a phenomenal increase. So if Zenon used 55%, right? Let's say the phenomenal increase is like fucking 3 times, right? So 55 times 3, right? 165 times. That's a 165 times multiplier, which means he would already be above continental level, which means he would already be multi-continental, since he would already meet the criteria by like 3 times. And that's only him by like 55%. But when he goes into 100%, you can straight up say he's moon level. Now for his demon form though, now let's say he only got like 14 times stronger than what he was when he was in his 100% state. This nigga would literally scale to small planet level. Now I know that shit seems crazy, but nigga, it's literally the multipliers, my nigga. Because for the attack potency to destroy a moon and to destroy a small planet, it's literally a 14 times difference. Now let's go to speed. Now before even Black Clover had started, right, he was literally on the same squad as Morgan, right? And guess what magic Morgan had, right? Light. And technically they were both like a duo. And for every duo that Yami was in, he was literally relative to the other guy. And when Yami and Jack fought, Jack literally shaved a fucking mountain. So let's say Yami in the beginning, right, was only mountain level and the speed of light. Now let's say Yami scales above base Zenon, in which he technically does, and which will make him now country level plus. But here's the thing, this is where I get to the speed. Because for the AP to destroy a mountain to destroying a fucking country is a 1,000,000 times difference. And we would have to multiply it by like 3 because country level plus is like multiple countries. So it would actually be 3,000,000 times the difference. And technically, since the Black Clover multipliers, it's like simple, like your speed increases, your strength decreases, like etc. So that would mean if he got 3,000,000 times stronger, why wouldn't he get 3,000,000 times faster? So I'm just gonna leave it at that, because if I keep on going with these multipliers, my nigga, like it's gonna be one-sided as fuck. So for the conclusion of his stats, AP, country to multi-continental to moon to small planet. Speed, massively faster than light plus, being 3,000,000 times the speed of light in base. Now for the versus battle. So this is technically how it would go. So they would both look at each other in pure silence, right? So they would just stand there and look at each other in pure silence. Then Ulquiorra would realize that he's not a threat because of his spiritual pressure, because he cannot read it, because he does not have any forms of spiritual pressure. So Ulquiorra would look down on this nigga while talking shit. And the thing about Zenon, he's not even fazed by the shit talk. Like, he truly does not give a fuck. So Zenon blitzes Ulquiorra with a whole bunch of bone attacks, right? But the thing about the bone attacks is that it's not piercing through this nigga's skin because he's too fucking durable. So Zenon decides to go full throttle and goes 100%. Because he realized, oh nah, fuck this shit, my attacks can't even pierce through this nigga. And what you also have to think about Zenon is that he's literally a war veteran. He is smart. Like, this nigga's battle IQ is all the way up there. So Zenon traps Ulquiorra into a prison, right, a spatial prison, and starts piercing him with bones and shit. So Ulquiorra starts to realize this nigga's an actual threat and goes straight into his first release. But then Ulquiorra realized that Zenon pierced one of his organs. So Ulquiorra goes straight into his second release, fully serious, because he knows he's going to die. So it's technically now or fucking never. So he throws this big ass blast at Zenon. But you know Zenon, he dodges that shit casually. But then it explodes, catching him off guard because he gets caught in the crossfire, in which critically damages this nigga. Like, Zenon only has half of his body. So he does a contract with this devil, right? And he becomes full on devil Zenon. So then he starts combining his spatial and his bone magic to create this sword called Danslif, right? And proceeds to slice Ulquiorra into non-existing pieces. And before he could try to regenerate, he proceeds to disappear, which means that Zenon wins. Diff low. If I ain't off them drugs, I don't feel like myself. All I need is your love. Don't want nobody else. You say I make you